Welcome to the Sharp Way Show. A little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast, which means you have to look at my mug. Yes, I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. Actually, I make them and enforce them. So yes, you must look at me at 7 p.m. I appreciate it. I'm so glad that you're with me this evening because I have a very interesting topic, I think, for this evening. And of course, I always have interesting topics. But I'm going to lie and say it's the most interesting. It's probably not, but that's okay. I'm going to pretend that it is because I want you to believe it. Is the right change for the U.S. left or right? Or is it neither? Is it both? I'm bringing on two people to discuss this, people who are all about topics just like this, and I'm sure this will be such a calm and cool and boring subject. They'll say nothing interesting whatsoever. I will have to carry most of the show, I'm sure. It's Keaton and Russell from Due Dissidence. How are you?
I'm doing great, Larry. Thank you so much for having us. You know, I put myself in the mood for this conversation a couple hours ago by visiting the Easy Pass website because my wife is having a problem with her Easy Pass where it was renewing for too high an amount because she used to do a lot of tolls in a long commute. Now she doesn't, so we're trying to change it. And, of course, the Easy Pass is a New York State government website. And whatever differences people may have in terms of political ideology, everyone is a libertarian while browsing a government website. Everyone.
100%
because the thing has not been updated since 1997. And the reason why is because there's no competition. So I put myself in the zone for you, in the frame of mind to talk to a libertarian by visiting a government website. So I'm here for
that.
You. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Now I feel better already. That's awesome. That's awesome. So thanks for coming. But I think what you just mentioned is something important. Many people, when they see government failing, they start getting upset and they realize that it's been failing many people. In fact, I would argue most of us for a long time. And they get pissed off and they want something new. They want rebellion. They want something different. And I think that's one of the reasons why Bernie was so popular, right? Bernie was the nothing's working, let's fix it. The government is captured by the millionaires and billionaires, which it clearly is, right? It's obviously true. And let's change it. Let's change things. And I feel like people listen to them. And I'll go the opposite side. Trump, too, when Trump was talking about draining the swamp, right? So if you leaned left, you thought Bernie was the guy to change things. If you leaned right, you thought Trump was the guy to change things. And I feel like the country's been saying that for a long time. Am I wrong here?
Well, did they really think Trump was the guy to change things, or did they think he was the guy to throw a brick in the window and at the very least troll the libs? Because when they polled people on election day, even people who voted for him didn't really like him. So what was the purpose? You know, Michael Moore had that great speech he gave, ostensibly advocating for Hillary. He gave this speech at a little theater in Michigan. And he articulated what actually ended up happening. He said, you're really angry. The system has screwed you and you just want to burn it down and you're going to go and vote for Trump and it's going to feel good. Now, he was trying to make the case for not doing that. But what he described was exactly what ended up happening. So whereas I think the Bernie people thought what he was offering was actually a solution. I don't know how much of the motivation for electing Trump was that he would fix things as that he would troll the libs. And I think that's a big part of why
let me shift
his core incompetence didn't really hurt him with his voters.
Let me give you a picture in your mind, if I could. 2018, I'm running for governor crossing New York State. I get a picture sent to me. It's a picture that the guy sends to me. And the picture is him in front of his house. In front of his house, he has 4 banners. 4. Don't tread on me flag. Confederate flag, right? A Trump 2020, I think, sticker, whatever it was.
And a BLM flag. That was the curveball.
And a Larry Sharpe for governor flag. He's got those 4 there. And when I saw that, I was like, okay. And people who saw it were like, Larry, that makes no sense. I said, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. Like, what do you mean? All 4 of those to that guy are simply symbols of rebellion. That's all they are. right? If you're upstate New York, you don't see the Confederate flag as a Confederate flag. You see it as a rebel flag. That's how you see it. If you're in Georgia, maybe you think it as a Confederate flag. But in New York, you see it as a rebel flag. Don't Tread on Me is a rebel flag. Larry Sharpe was a rebel, right? Trump was a rebel. That's how I think he saw it. So in his mind, that was a totally congruent thing. So
Sure.
I think they thought
hey, the Secretary of the Treasury for the Confederacy was Jewish, so that was probably what he was gesturing towards.
That's what it was. He knew that. He was like, I bet that. Yes, you're right. It was so nuanced. I missed it. I'm so glad. I feel better. Okay, so I said I'm wrong.
It was referencing Judah P. Benjamin.
That's who it was. It was retro. Yeah. Okay, I'm off. But being though.
Yeah. No. Look, I
don't think it was trolling. I think they thought he would fight for them.
Yes.
And I think
I
don't think they thought Bernie was going to walk in and fix everything, but I thought they thought Bernie was going to fight for them, and I think they thought Trump was going to fight for them. Keaton, tell me, am I wrong?
No, I think that's right. I think that's right. In a very, very fundamental sense, and I've talked about this on the show before, Trump was a nationalist, and what did we hear all throughout that 2016 campaign? It was really framed by the elements of the sort of alt-right media as a fight between globalism and nationalism.
Right.
And Trump really saw, and to this day, I contend that the core of his appeal is that he views America not the way all of these Democrat and Republican bullshit artists try to sell America as what? An idea, a dream, a goal to live up to. No, Trump views America as a place in the world that's ours. And he feels that American leadership should represent American interests and American people and obviously American money. And that is just a real breath of fresh air to a lot of people who feel like their government for the longest time has not served as their representative, but rather as the sort of neutral arbiter of this global economic system that both left factions and right factions are sort of working together behind the scenes to sort of usher in. Trump represented an absolute rejection of that for all his faults, and I think that was a main motivator for a lot of people to go out and vote for him, even despite the fact that in those early polls in 2015 and early 2016, before the primary starts, he was clearly the highest risk candidate. I remember seeing general election polls of John Kasich blowing Hillary Clinton out. I mean, blowing her out. He was beating her in Connecticut. He was within single digits of her in New York. I mean, that was obviously the safe general election pick, and obviously they really wanted to beat her very badly, right? The prospect of her sitting in the Oval Office had been haunting Republicans' dreams for 25 years. This was not someone where like, we'll take a chance. If we lose, we lose. No, they really wanted to win, but they wanted Trump more, even more than they wanted to beat her. They wanted to, as Russ said, throw a brick in the system. And yes, put someone in there who they felt would do their bidding on the world stage. And that, in a true sense, was, yes, a very much an act of revolt.
Exactly. And I guess what they also gave, though, was, I feel like so many times you hear the same old thing, right? And you recently heard it here in New York, where I am, in that, people are now mad at AOC because she was supposed to be the savior. She was supposed to fix things. She was supposed to be, you were the chosen one. And she was not the chosen one at all, right? She was not the chosen one at all. She didn't bring balance to the force or anything. She did none of that, right?
She's your rep, isn't she? You're in her district.
She's my rep. Yes, literally. Yes, she's my rep. Absolutely. And I think people are upset at her now because things aren't going that way. So people are tired of being told, just vote harder. Right? If you didn't vote hard enough, if you just vote harder, then things will work. But I think that people like Bernie, people like Trump, back in 2008, even Obama, they gave people hope. And people always tell me, Larry, how bad's it got to get before people start making change? I said, it isn't about it getting bad. If things just stay bad, people just stay bad, right? It's called learned helplessness. We don't actually act. We act once things are bad, and it's a critical and we see hope. Right? If those two things connect, then we act, right? So are guys like us, meaning when I say like us, I don't mean handsome men, which we all are. I don't mean that. What I mean is guys like us who are kind of the independent.
I mean, that's like a base thing that you need. You have to,
yes,
you have
yes.
to start with handsome men.
Correct. Everyone knows.
Sorry,
how
ladies.
No one would watch.
So I'm just saying, everyone knows how hot we are, so I don't have to mention it 10 times, but I will anyway because I'm a narcissist. But yes, we are absolutely hot. Besides that point, are we doing something special, right? Media like ours, independent media, is clearly growing. It's obviously growing, getting stronger. Mainstream media is clearly in trouble in many different ways. It's in trouble. Is it because we're giving them hope? Or are we doing more harm than good? In other words, if we start to knock down the institutions that people used to believe in and trust, right? Walter Cronkite and that kind of stuff. If we knock those down,
I mean, those days are long gone.
Tell me,
I just finished watching the final season of Succession. And I said, okay, if Patty Chayefsky were alive today, this is what he would have written. And it's the further we go into the future, the more incredibly prophetic Network is. I mean, it's amazing how much he saw the world we were going to be living in, where the news would become entertainment that way, that it would just all become the same as their other programming, where it would just all become about ratings. This was a nightmare vision. I mean, he predicted both reality TV, where you had the guerrilla army that he's going to follow around with a camera in it,
right,
and just show them robbing banks with Patty Hearst. And so he predicted reality TV, and he also predicted the character of news today. I mean, Walter Cronkite, he's been buried for a very long time. I think with the alternative media, broadly speaking, embracing the what some would call right, some would call left, whatever. Some people who don't fit in a lane. At best, I think at this moment we are facilitating a conversation about what to do next. At our best,
okay.
At our worst, we are just like the corporate media in that look, you don't have to be doing this for very long to figure out which videos get clicks and which ones don't.
And no, not mine. The ones that not mine are the ones that get clicks. Not mine.
There are a lot of channels that
I figured that one out quick.
They fall down that rabbit hole. Well, you're maintaining your integrity. God bless you, but a lot of people don't. They figure out that the gossip. I mean, especially when you see, there's an old saying, the fights are so harsh because the spoils are so small. So you'll see like a lot of people in alternative media fighting each other basically for clicks. It's like it's the same wrestling mentality that we criticized corporate media for. Oh, did you see what Brianna Joy Gray said about da 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 da?
I gotta tell you, bringing that up, right? I see it because I'm one of the weird guys, and if you know, I reach out to everybody. I reach out to every single group I can possibly reach out to, left, right, and independent. And I can see that once I have like one guy or gal on, the others get mad at me. How could you bring him on? He's part of this clique that you've never heard of, and that matters doesn't matter to you whatsoever, and that kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, am I now part of that clique now? I guess I am, whatever clique that is. Yes.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of that. On the question of are we giving people false hope? Are we keeping people hopeful? Are we driving people towards hopelessness and inaction and despair? This is a question that I've sort of addressed head on, a handful of times. When we guested on our friends at RBN, we guested on their show a few weeks ago for the first time. We did this sort of post-duopoly panel. It's a sort of a recurring sort of super group, if you will, of different hosts in this space, right? Sort of a traveling Wilburys of nihilists, if you will. But I don't.
They have another one of those called the leftist mafia. Does that too?
Oh
right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there you go. So it's like that, only the sort of red pill version of that. And I said something.
We're looking for a Billy Preston. So
right, exactly. Yeah. I said something on one of those shows that I think struck a little bit of a chord with some of the people who were watching, because I saw different people commented on it, which is that at a moment like this, sometimes you just have to sit with a feeling of despair, sit with a feeling of hopelessness, and sit with a feeling that for the short term, at least, you're failing and that you
Right.
have no momentum and that you're in shambles and you're lost and you're trying to figure out where to go. And I don't mean that to depress people. I mean that to give people an opportunity to just let go of anything that might give you false hope. Because to me, the first step towards recognizing a way forward is recognizing that the paths you're on have been dead ends. So when Russell's talking about some people in this indie media space behave with the same incentives as the corporate media people, in our sort of, progressive left media world, we would put the people who are propping up the Marianne Williamson campaign in that category, right? They are selling people hope by trying to get them as excited for Marianne Williamson as they were for Bernie Sanders. And they call people like us nihilists who are selling hopelessness and inaction.
I want to touch that piece if I could.
Of course,
Are you telling me that the idea that you're not happy with Marianne Williamson, or are you saying you're not happy with pumping her up because you think she can't win? Which one of those are you talking about?
Well, a little bit of both, actually.
In our case, it's some of column A and some of column B.
It's some of column A and B.
We're warmer towards RFK Jr., but we have the same attitude about his campaign.
Same attitude, right. Right. So anyway, so you have some indie media people who are trying to recreate that Bernie magic behind her campaign. And I suspect it's because presidential campaigns put asses in the seats for a media channel. Because when you cover a presidential campaign, you have a built-in narrative for your show for as long as that campaign lasts. Every time the candidate who you're championing does an interview, you can cover the interview and comment on it. Every time there's a piece written about that candidate, you can comment on that piece. Was it fair? Was it unfair? Do we like it? Do we not like it? So it really makes a commentator's job a lot easier, especially going into a national race, to back somebody. And what they're doing in Marianne's case and in RFK's case, to a slightly lesser extent, I would argue, but same thing. They're trying to recreate that momentum that the Bernie campaign gave a lot of these indie media spaces and the people who watch them. They're trying to sell them on the idea that this is
for a second.
Sure.
The RFK road, right? I got to tell you, I'm actually surprised how many libertarians like RFK. A lot of libertarians like RFK. And I would have thought, no way a libertarian is going to like some fringe Democrat. That's never going to happen. I was wrong. There are a lot of libertarians.
There
like
are,
RFK.
and I think there's a reason for that. But just to put a little button on that point I was making, in my view, selling people on those candidates in the hopes that they might break through is really not being productive. You're much better off just having a reality check with yourself that no, those candidates are both dead in the water. They're dead in the water because there is not the oxygen in this political moment that will afford them what they need to win. And so therefore, those are closed doors. And you're much better off seeing a closed door for what it is than convincing yourself that there's a path through. Because that's just a waste of time, and that only creates more despair in the long term.
You're literally telling me to stop being a libertarian is what you're actually telling me right now. You're literally telling
me
no, libertarian.
No, not at all.
Because the odds of our candidate winning are slim.
No, not at all. No, hold on, but
we still push our candidates forward. We still try to push our message forward.
Absolutely.
We still do all the same things, even though we know the odds of a victory. I mean, don't get me wrong. Locally,
100%.
Sometimes libertarians do win locally across the country. It does happen. It's crazy rare that we win, and we never win national. But sometimes I think like once every couple of years we win like a state legislator or something like this happen. It's just grossly rare. So if we run 500 candidates, I mean, maybe we get 10 victories.
I'm not saying that the sort of determinative factor of whether or not a candidate is worth backing is whether or not they will win. It's what will become of that candidacy and of the movement behind that candidacy. So if RFK were running as an independent, we would probably back him because we would feel like even though he's not going to win, getting him behind RFK, if he runs outside the two-party system, is making an investment in a movement that might survive an electoral defeat and might change the paradigm down the road. Running in a fucking Democratic primary, where you know as well as anybody, the game is rigged from the start.
Correct.
And even if it wasn't rigged, Democratic primary voters are the dumbest fucking people on earth. Rob Reiner just put out a tweet today that's gotten a lot of focus. Don't tell me about how old Joe Biden is. Just shut up and vote to save democracy. Now, I'm sorry, the DNC is not
like the contradictions in that statement.
Shut up and vote to save democracy.
How do you write that sentence and not see how moronic it is?
Right. So the DNC, as corrupt as it is, they are not forcing the droves of liberal morons to like and retweet that. People are doing that on their own because people who follow Rob Reiner are rank and file Democrats and they're dumb as fucking dog shit. So between all of the corruption at the top and the rank and file just being just totally worthless, there is no space to succeed in a Democratic primary. And because these two candidates are running inside a Democratic primary, there is no chance for sustained momentum once the primary ends. Whereas a candidate like you or a libertarian or a green or any third party candidate, yes, we would fully support them. Even though they're not going to win, we feel like that's an investment in a more transcendent project.
I like that. Let me do some admin if I could.
Sure.
If you are listening or watching right now, do me a favor, click that like button. I need to get past Mr. Go Rhythm. Algorithm is always beating me up. So I need you to get past algorithm. So please go out of your way. Say again?
Yeah, hit the like button. Hit that like button. Please help me out. If you are watching on Twitter, retweet this right now. Stop looking at these three handsome men. I know you're mesmerized, but that's okay. Close your eyes for a couple seconds and then click retweet on Twitter. If you are on YouTube, you may super chat me if you like. Absolutely. I will get to those in 2 seconds. If you want to support the show directly, you can. Patreon.com/Sharpway. Throw me $10 a month. I'll spend less time consulting with big business, which makes most of you angry. And instead, I'll do more of this instead. So I won't be serving the man. I'll be serving you instead. But more importantly, these two gentlemen are showing us some love. Show them some love. Follow them on Twitter or follow them on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel over at Due Dissidence. It's both YouTube and Twitter is the same, and you can check it out in the description if you want to. Let me grab, if I could, a couple of super chats. Sure.
Patrick says, love Due Dissidence, the leaders of the sane left. Keep up the good fight, guys.
Santé, Patrick.
Yes, there we go.
Thank you, Patrick.
Also,
we're very big in Ireland.
I like that. Roger Meadows, who comes on your show and mine. He's watching them all. Common theme all New Yorkers, regardless of ideology, should come together on is to make New York State a citizen ballot initiative state so we can place our own amendments in the ballot for ratification into New York State Constitution. Let's do it. I happen to agree with Roger in this one. I think that ballot initiatives, well, without question, I had Mark Meckler on last night. He was not happy about it. He thought there's going to be a lot of problems like in California. And I think his fear is a valid fear. I do. I think there will be problems with it. It won't be perfect. But I think overall it's so much better. I think in the long run, we're going to get a whole lot more. And we get to get around bad laws that the state doesn't want to help the people. I feel like this, with the problems that may occur, is still better than our current terrible system. Am I off, guys? Tell me.
No, I think you're right, especially in a state like New York, which is a one-party state where you have a lot of people who say that, despite their loyalty to one major party or the other, they will often have individual sort of specific policy stances that buck that party. And so if you put certain measures directly to the people themselves to vote up or down, that's one way to sort of hopefully in certain cases circumvent the sort of monopoly that in this case Democrats have on a state like New York. And then, in a more conservative state, it would work the same way in the other way. So yeah, no, I think those are worth fighting for in, just about everywhere.
And I think it doesn't matter whether you're left or right or whatever you are, right?
Well,
yeah, no, I mean, why should it?
No, and when you scratch the surface, people aren't really right or left. I mean, most of them aren't. The people who shout the loudest are. But most people are reasonable. There was an article years ago, and of course, this is never amplified very much in the media. I can't remember who printed this, but I think the name of the article was "Democrats Can Stop Worrying About Appealing to the Center because the Center doesn't exist."
Yeah, I remember.
And it showed what the centrist American really looks like. The centrist American wants legalized pot, and they want a wall on the southern border, right?
Yes.
So there is not this strict left-right dichotomy that people think there is. You know, that people have been sold, like doctrinaire Democrats have been sold on the idea that the same people who want to build a border wall are inherently hostile to universal health care or to even the expansion of healthcare. And that's part of how they're trained to be able to condescend to them, right? Like, oh God, they're so stupid. They vote against their own interests. Really?
Yes.
I mean, you talk about them like monkeys in a zoo. Why would they think that you're going to govern in their interest? What have you ever done for them? You told them that NAFTA was going to give them better jobs, right? That was your guy who sold that.
So, I know. Absolutely.
Why would they feel that you're governing in their interest? But that's the party line with them. Oh, these stupid people,
so
they vote against their own interests.
Let me push again, Roger, what he's talking about. What I like about it is, to your point, is you look at a place like Kentucky, red state, right? And but then all of a sudden you ask if they want to do a ban on abortion. They're like, no, we don't want that. No. The people said no when their representatives might have said yes. And so in that case, you see the left that would actually, to your point, it's a red state, but you get a left result. I think in New York, if you put school choice on the ballot, I think school choice passes. It's just right.
Yeah.
I think it definitely would.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it definitely would.
Minimum wage and a lot in Florida by 20 points the same day that everyone voted for Trump, right? Or not everyone, but what did Trump win the state? 53-47. Minimum wage won 60-40. So yeah.
Absolutely.
And I am exactly at the age right now where a lot of the people I grew up with are lib parents with kids in high school. And a lot of the stuff they're trying to do with getting rid of standardized tests and grading and the higher track classes, they're horrified. I'm seeing a lot of them. It's so funny. They're liberal until they did that, and all of a sudden their kids are in Catholic school.
Yes.
They're not all of a sudden they're not so liberal anymore. Their kids are in Xavier now.
In New York City, 2 kids, one now 19, one 13. I homeschooled one for a couple years, put him in Greek school because my family's Orthodox Greek, right? So put him in Greek school. So I did all that. I did exactly this. If I was Catholic, I probably went to Catholic school, right? I mean, I totally agree. I did all the same things because I was concerned too. I was worried about that, right? I thought it was crazy. But then let me shift, if I could, to this idea what you brought up. So many of the changes we're seeing are cultural changes. But what most Americans actually want are either economic or social changes, right? They want one of those two. But we keep getting culture war stuff that just throws people on one side or the other and then creates these crazy hills that the left or the right has to die on. I'm like, why are you dying on these hills? They are dumb culture war hills to die on. Don't do this, but they constantly do it.
Yeah, no, they're on a tear right now. They had Bud Light, then they had Target. Now they're talking about Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A, I know.
Yes.
I haven't gotten to dig into that
Chick-fil-A.
yet. So what is it? They did like an ad that they didn't like or something?
I don't know. It wasn't an ad. It's their. They appointed a DEI. They adopted some DEI strategy.
Years ago, they dug this up. This isn't even recent. This is years ago.
Well, so now they
DEI stuff. And then like, here you go. And we're like, no, now we have to boycott Jesus chicken. We don't want to do that. Not that. And that's not a new thing.
No, I'm telling you, that Bud Light boycott is like the Bernie Sanders of the right-wing media. The way a lot of indie left people said, oh, let's recreate that Bernie magic with Marianne. Now I'm telling you, Daily Wire, all these outlets are going to be, man, how do we reignite that Bud Light magic? Let's just pick a company to boycott. It's going to be every week now. There's going to be another one.
Every week.
I mean, but on a serious level, this is something, there's, I think, part of why Patrick would call us the sane left, because most of the people who are considered left are not sane in this area. They're not sane on these issues. And, we're hard-bitten, reality-based New York guys. We don't buy most of this bullshit. And we've been saying for a very long time, well, at least I have, and Keaton has not generally disagreed, that eventually people are just going to figure out how to vote in the ways that they can. Mostly that's going to be with their wallets, because
or their feet.
You're pushing cultural stuff on them that they don't like, that is so offensive to the majority, not a minority, a majority of people, that in the end, you're not going to force this DEI stuff down their throats.
No.
You're not going to force the idea that their little Mandy 16-year-old girl needs to be in a bathroom with a guy with a penis, whatever they identify as. You're never selling that to the majority of people. So when you look at the Bud Light thing and you look at the Target thing, it's easy to laugh at because of the targets, like literally the target. But it speaks to an overall social mood that in the end is very consequential to electoral politics.
And I think the hardest part is when you start getting suburban moms to where they have to be arrested. And it's coming to that, right? It's actually coming to that point. And I'll give you an example in New York. Homeschooling. There's a lot of moms who are now homeschooling. And basically in New York, not actually, but
it's all over the country, though.
Yes, but in New York State, it's basically illegal. It's not actually illegal.
Is it?
But it's basically illegal. It's not actually. But what happens is, for example, in New York State, you can homeschool if it's only your kid. That's it. So if, say, you have a kid, Russell, and Keaton has a kid, and we all decide to get together and create a pod, that's literally against New York State law. Right? You can't do that. You have to become a school, and then they control you. That's how it works in New York State. And what's happening is all across New York State, they're just making pods. They're saying, I don't care about the law. Eventually, they're going to have to go and arrest a mom who's teaching her kid. And when that happens, the ball game's over. That's when it's over, when the state troopers come in and go, we're arresting 3 moms and, putting them in jail because they tried to teach their kids something, right? That is going to be when it hits. And it's starting to happen more and more and more. How do I know this? You see it with the war on drugs. When the war on drugs was destroying black communities in the 80s and 90s, there's no tomorrow. They're being destroyed. But then instead we were doing social media about it. I'm sorry, not social media, regular media, TV shows, cops. That's what we were doing.
Right.
But now it's affecting everybody. Now suburban moms, their kids are now on drugs. Now we care. Let's make weed legal. Let's start rethinking things. Now we care. Once suburban moms are affected, that's when things change. That's the key. That's the turning point right there.
And that's I always point to. Look, right now DeSantis has kind of had a bad couple weeks, so everybody, they tend to think the snapshot is the election. I've been calling the election for Ron DeSantis for about a year, and part of what I'm basing that on, look how he performed in the midterms, and I saw a very clear parallel between that and what happened with Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, because both results. I mean, DeSantis probably could have won on the Republican base in Florida, but he increased his margins in Democratic counties by like 30 points in Miami-Dade, right, Keaton?
Yeah,
it was like 30-point
about a 25
swing
there,
between elections. Why? See, there's this narrative in the media that these suburban wine moms are libs who don't like the kinds of cultural policies that DeSantis has. But, I'm betting they heard about those policies when they voted, and the result was a 30-point swing.
Yeah, so but there's a difference, though. I got to give you pushback on this, Russ. There's a big difference, and the big difference. We're talking Republican primary voters with a field of 8 to 10 people to choose from.
Right.
And it's basically Trump and everyone else gets the scraps. And when it's that level, Trump has about a 30 to 35% in the Republican Party that will support him no matter what. If he literally shot DeSantis in the head on stage, 30% would still vote for him. Right? 30% would still vote for him.
I don't know that that's true. I think it's more apparent than real. Because
have you ever been upstate New York?
All right. My argument, I think, definitely speaks to, and I think you would probably agree with this, that DeSantis in the end would be the stronger general election candidate. Because
Agreed.
You'd have all these Democrat wine bombs who voted for Biden would actually vote for DeSantis secretly. They wouldn't put the sign on their lawn. They wouldn't tell anybody, but they'd all be secretly voting for DeSantis.
100%.
I'm sure that's out winning Miami-Dade. I'm sure they didn't tell anyone they were going to vote for DeSantis.
That's here in New York City. The amount of older women I know who literally say, I'm so tired of the woke, I hope it's not Trump. Because they hate Trump because of his mean tweets. And I'm not joking.
Exactly.
They hate Trump, not because of policy. They hate him because of mean tweets. So if you take out the mean tweets, there's a bunch of New York City women who are all over 50 that I know personally who would absolutely vote for DeSantis. You're totally correct.
Okay, correct. So in terms of his prospects within the Republican field, you know, I've seen people say, "Oh, Ron DeSantis is Jeb Bush." Well, no, he's not. No, he's not. And Trump has never really had competition. He came out of nowhere. He was running against a bunch of meatballs who brought a knife to a gunfight, who really didn't understand the way Trump was flipping the table and changing all the rules. By the time they figured it out, it was too late.
Any better though?
Because of his record in Florida, because he can run credibly as a successvotable executive who can actually deliver the Republican
I feel like you don't know Republicans, my friend. Republican voters who vote in the primary, they care about one thing more than anything else: strength. That is the number one thing they care about. Are you going to go up there and fight? Are you going to fight the libs? Are you going to fight the Dems? That is their number one issue. I saw it here in the Republican primary in New York State even. Right? We had four people who could have run, and we picked the only guy who was a Trumpster out of the four that were running. All had better chances of winning. Astorino is a far better conservative than any of them, not even close. Giuliani's kid is the most exciting of all of them. You want excitement, no matter what is most exciting. And Wilson was the crossover candidate. He worked for Obama. So you had three people who could have actually had a chance at that, who might have excited people, got people going. And they picked Zeldin, who? Trump's lawyer. He could yell and scream and call people names. That's what he did. And that's what he did well. So that's what he did. I think when Trump gets on that stage and he yells Meatball Ron or whatever, DeSanctimonious or whatever name he comes up with, I think Ron collapses, and then people go, "That's my boy Trump." Yep, he's.
I think that's exactly where the difference is, because you remember how everybody thought Mike Tyson was literally invincible until he got knocked out.
It's true.
All it's going to take is for Ron to mess him up. I don't know how you feel about the F-bomb on your show. All it's going to take.
He said it like 7 times already. What are you talking about?
Oh, did you? All right. All it's going to take is for Ron to fuck him up in that debate, take him apart, and he has a lot of vulnerabilities. And yeah, he'll do his Trump thing, but he's not going to be able to say, "Oh, your mother should be running." He's not going to be able to pull that shit with Ron DeSantis. What's he going to pull?
Maybe you're right. I don't know.
So Trump gets punched in the face, knocked around by Ron DeSantis in a debate. Ron DeSantis is very smart. He's very disciplined, and he has a record to run on. He fucks him up in one debate. That aura of Trump is going to evaporate. That's what I mean by it's more apparent than real.
Let's make a deal. Let's make a deal now in public. After the first Republican debate, we do a show together and we debrief and see who was right.
All right. Sure, absolutely. That would be great. Fun. That would be a lot of fun.
Because I know I'm going to be right. I'm going to have a whole bunch of I told you so's. But it's fine. I'll take it. Oh, good.
All right. I haven't promised anything outrageous if he wins, right? I've only I promised somebody that if RFK polled 45% in the Democratic primary, I would dress as Boy George and sing Karma Chameleon. I think I'm safe on that one, though.
I think you're good on that.
I think I'm safe.
Now I'm going to give RFK money now. Now that I know that's going to happen, I'm so giving him money now. Just to get you to do that, I'm giving him money.
I set the bar very high.
So, but let me stay on the culture piece if I could. And the reason why I say it is if you look at the outcomes for most things, to your points earlier, most people want the same outcomes. But we wind up ignoring the outcomes or even the plans because we're fighting over culture war stuff, right? We're fighting over whether or not we should, whether or not we should, buy Bud Light or not. Like that's the thing, right? It's a culture war issue versus whether this plan or this idea is going to actually do anything, right? If it's going to work. And what winds up happening is, and I say it all the time, Republicans wind up becoming the party of no ideas, and the Democrats become the party of bad ideas. And that's it. That's what happens. And then people just go, well, there's no way any of it's going to work. So which guy do I hate least? And I vote for that guy or gal. I feel like we're really screwing up this culture war stuff. And part of it is the words. Literally the words. We do two things. Insanely harsh words and then euphemisms that actually seem stupid. And then we go crazy over it. So you don't like, you don't like you don't like trans people. It's now trans genocide. Wow. Okay, I get it. You don't. The guy doesn't like trans people. Thinks they're not real. Whatever.
Well, it's not. It doesn't even have to rise to a level of not liking it. You know, if it rises to a level of you don't think that biological men should be able to beat the shit out of women in a ring, you're committing trans genocide. You're trying to erase our existence.
Yes. I mean, isn't this a bigger problem? Because now people are only looking at that. Mm-hmm. And so now a candidate gets on a show on TV or whatever, and they don't say, what's your plan to fix X? They go, do you agree there's a trans genocide happening right now?
Well, that's how they want it. That's how they want it.
That's the question?
It's a confluence of interests. You know, I think it's a combination of when progress goes far enough, eventually it becomes regressive. You know, the left.
What do you mean?
Well, the left has this notion, this vision of history, that progress is in a straight line, that everything new is better, that everything new is good. They don't ever look at the idea, or they don't look at the historical fact that most new ideas are actually bad. Most of them fail. Very few of them succeed. So they'll always connect whatever particular social movement fetish they have at the moment to the great ones, right? Well, this is MLK at the lunch counter. They never compare it to like the commune movement. They never think they're in that. They never think they're wearing bell bottoms, right? They always think they picked one of the good ones. That in spite of all the evidence, where 90% of the causes of any era are going to wind up being misguided. That whatever they believe in is part of that 10%. But also when your whole view of the world is constant progress, right? Mm-hmm. You don't ever believe you're in a good place then, right? So what if you actually get in a good place and then you keep going? So this is why I think a lot of the left kind of gives the impression of having jumped the shark now, because you kind of feel like we were in a good place with gay rights and race relations. Things
this is what I'm saying,
but they were in a pretty good place, and then you had to keep going.
Also, let me bring some up to you, which I think you may enjoy. Like I said, I have daughters, right, who are younger. I show them movies from the 80s and the 90s, and they're like, wow, this is inclusive. Yes, we were getting there. We were on our way. Like that was a thing. We were doing it, right? We were having female lead characters. We were having people of color, right? That was happening all the way through. It wasn't perfect. Don't get me wrong. It never will be, but it was absolutely getting better. And then we said, no. It must be, everyone must be a black woman lesbian in every role, or it's not good enough. I was like, wow, we were doing, why'd you stop? We made it to a point where we almost got angry at it.
I mean, Buffy the Vampire Slayer was the high point of our civilization.
Well, when you look at, I mean, it's funny because when you look at the pop culture examples, right? I remember, you know, and this, I mean, yes, the 80s, 90s, absolutely. Even as far as the early to mid 2000s, really. I remember watching movies as a kid and a young adult, and even, you know, 18, 19 years old. And we would see a movie, you know, on at that time, and we would think, well, you know, 30, 40 years ago, you could never say this on TV, right? And now we can say this on TV. Now, when I watch Seinfeld reruns, I'm saying to myself, they could never say this now.
Go watch All in the Family.
They could only say this in that window of time. I was watching a Seinfeld rerun last night where George gets caught staring at a 15-year-old's, you know, breasts, you know, not naked breasts, but it was the cleavage stare. I was staring at cleavage, and it was an underage girl who he was staring at. Like, you could never in a million years air that on TV now, right? So now we are in a sort of more sort of puritanical environment.
It's like a magnet for your eyes, Jerry.
So now it's like you watch certain shows from that era and you think, well, you could never say that anymore.
Yes.
Right? So you talk about progress not being an arc, but it's almost, it starts to regress past the point. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I also think another part of it, though, is the stasis of the political moment. I think once a political system becomes so controlled by the forces that seek to keep it in a sort of permanent stalemate, there become no other fights worth having but the fights that are meaningless, because none of the meaningful fights are winnable. The progress, real progress, economic progress is not possible under this system. Social progress is not possible under the system. So the only fights worth having are fights about whether to buy Bud Light or Coors, or whether to shop at Target or Walmart, or now Chick-fil-A or Popeyes, whatever the fuck the next thing is going to be, right? Those are the only things that strike people as meaningful, because those are the only fights they have any real control over. Right.
I think
there's no healthcare reform coming down the pike anytime soon.
Yep.
Well, we could think I could want Medicare for all. You could want a different system. Some people could want this. Nothing's fucking happening. Right. Yep. The ACA, that was it. That was the last piece of healthcare reform we are seeing for at least a generation, if not 2 or 3. And so what's the point in arguing about that anymore? Really? Are we not just pissing in the wind? Whereas at least you can control what kind of beer you buy at the supermarket. And so you can fight with your friends about that. And it means something. Right.
So Roger says, imagine Andrew Dice Clay today.
Oh, forget about it.
Yeah.
He was controversial then.
Yeah, yes, he was. Yes, absolutely. And Sam brings up that I remember, because I'm a Star Trek fan. He brings up Ben Sisko, Deep Space Nine. For those of you who don't know, that was the first black captain.
Yeah.
Right? And that was the 90s. And what I liked about that is it wasn't what I see now, which does bother me a bit. And maybe because I'm old, I don't know. But when they take an old character and then race swap them, it does bother me. But when you just write new characters, I'm good. Like I'm old enough to remember, I liked Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, right? I'm old enough to know the 60s Star Trek, and I liked it. They didn't decide, let's make Star Trek again, but we'll make, Captain Kirk black or whatever, right? We'll make Mr. Spock Asian or something, whatever. They didn't do any of that. They just said, we're going to write new characters.
Yeah.
And I loved Ben Sisko. I thought Deep Space Nine, and some people get mad at me, was the best of the post, Star Trek series. It was the best of the series in my view. People disagree, they get mad at me, but I don't care. That's the one I like best. And it's a black captain. And it wasn't because he was black. It's because he was a good character, right? That was the piece.
Well, part of the problem, I think, it's a combination of things. Look, me and Keaton both come out of a theater background. And to me, the first sign that you have no talent is that you want a gender swap like Zeus story, right? Like that was what always told you that these people had no talent. Like if their big idea was to make Hamlet like female, it's like it's a substitute for actual creativity and insight. And there are a lot more hacks than there are talented people. Otherwise, we wouldn't call it talent. We call it something else. We call it talent because it's fucking rare. So these people have found out that they can jump on a political bandwagon. And then when they get called out for their shitty work, they can blame racism. They can blame sexism as long as they, diversify these characters.
But let me then go the opposite way then. Are we also doing something else? And, I'll give you the example of, people of color or BIPOC, right? Things like that. Again, I'm old enough to remember when Negro was good. Like, I remember, Negro was fine. That was better than the alternative. Like, that's fine, right? Like, I'm old to remember that, right? And as I got older, people use the word black all the time. I'm fine. Like, I'm biracial, so I prefer either call me biracial, I don't mind that, or black. That's what I prefer, right? That's my preferred. But when people call me something else, I don't get angry at them, right? Like when people say, well, Larry, he's African-American. I don't get mad. Okay. It's not my preferred. I prefer black, but it's fine. The world's not going to end. I don't care. It's fine, right? That's how I identify. I'm okay with it. But we have become so worried that if someone says Larry's black, there's someone in the room who goes, he's African-American. There's someone who'll be mad. And they'll be madder than me, and I'm the one being targeted, and they'll be madder than I am.
Well, because
it's crazy to me.
Well, because social justice isn't the purpose of it. Cultural signaling is the purpose of it. Signaling your elite status is the purpose of it. If you really want to see that in stark relief, homeless, unhoused, houseless are literally the same word. Those are completely synonymous. So you accomplish absolutely nothing. You can't make, and you can make an argument for women with a Y. You can make the argument. There's some rational argument to not making women derivative of the word men. There's some rational argument to that. There is no rational reason to, instead of saying homeless, say unhoused or houseless. So what is the purpose of making that change? It is to signal your cultural sophistication and to separate people of your class from those people. If they don't say unhoused, that's a signal that they're not in the cult.
They're not cool like us.
They're not cool like us. That's the purpose of all this language policing.
Got it. Now we know who the cool kids are.
That's it.
I like it.
Well, so that's all politics is to a lot of these people. Because partly because of who they are, right? That's a big part of it. But it's also partly because of what I talked about earlier. It's partly because of the state of the system, right? It's their version of the Target boycott, right? It's the lib version of, okay, well, you know, they put a rainbow checkered shirt next to the children's jeans, so we're never shopping there again. It's a version of that. It's signaling that you are part of the group, that you want to be a part of.
I tell you what really bothers me. I'm going to kind of validate even more what you just said. I literally spent years creating policies to fix New York. Now, many people don't like my policies, and that's okay. Don't mind. I literally did, this is a true story, 8 hours live straight without a bathroom break or eating, New York State policy, how to fix New York State, straight live, and ran out of time. I had more I could have talked about. I have it on my website since 2017, policies to fix New York. Not that you should love my policies, not that you should all adopt them. I mean, you should, obviously, but not that what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, wouldn't someone think if you wanted to fix anything, that you would take my policies and tweak them, change them, critique them, debate them, something, right? You would do something. Here's a candidate who is saying stuff. No one in the media, not one person in the media would actually do that and go, Larry, you know, your policy on so-and-so is garbage. What about this problem? Or it's great. I love it. Why don't we do it? Nobody in the media would do that. The only people who would do it is some podcasters. That was it. Nobody. The best I got was Joe Rogan talking about my bridges and my tunnel idea. That was the best I ever got. No, and again, people saw it, didn't do it. Worse, there are hundreds of people in New York State who could take my policies and begin to implement them. Right? They're all in the assembly. They're in the state senate. They run for office. It's free. Just take it. I'll keep my mouth shut. Just take it. I want to fix the state. I've said that publicly. They're there to be taken. Nobody will do it. They'll fight over everything else, but they won't fight over actual policy. And naively, Keaton, to your point, I honestly believed back in 2018, I honestly did believe this, that if I threw out good policies, the media would pick them up and force them to be debated and fought on. I honestly believe that. What a naive chump I was.
Oh, well, look, they're voting on this debt ceiling bill in about 5 minutes, right? It's 7:55 right now. You know, you had Ro Khanna, so-called progressive congressman. I think it's for 8 o'clock. Yeah, come on MSNBC, and they asked him, "Are you a yes or a no?" And he says, "Well, I'm voting no, but I have full confidence that the debt ceiling deal will pass, and I've told Biden that if he needs me to vote yes, I will, but in good conscience, I can't because it's a shitty bill." So, yeah, that's exactly the face I would expect someone to make when hearing that. We're going to cover that on tomorrow's show because it's astounding. He's literally saying, I'm against it in principle, so I'm voting no, but I've already told the president I will vote yes if he needs me to. So what that means is you're a yes. What it means is that by voting no, you are simply saying, I am voting no to make a symbolic gesture to my base that I oppose the bill, but I understand that when push comes to shove, if Biden needed the votes, if it came down to it, I would vote yes. Now, why do I bring that up as a response to what you just said? Because it speaks to the stasis of politics, where policy ideas cannot be litigated in this moment in any mainstream circle, because even guys like Ro Khanna are like, yeah, no, I'm against this, so I'm voting no, but I'm only voting no because he probably has the votes anyway. If my vote could actually change something, I have to vote yes because we have to get this deal passed because we can't default on the debt, right? So that just speaks to how cornered we are. Right. And by we, I mean people who have ideas that don't conform to what's generally thought of as mainstream ideas. Right. There is no place we can go. There's no forum that will hear us out. Even if there was a forum that will hear us out, I feel like the system being as locked down as it is right now, there's no room to move, even if you get a hearing. And so that's why you got guys going on TV saying
a little bit insight into running for office. Why am I able to create interesting policies with some detail behind them? It's not because I'm super smart. That's not the reason. I get a lot of smart people to help me. Why would I get a lot of smart people to help me? I don't pay them. They're all volunteers. My policy team is all volunteers. I get smart people to come help me, to give me detailed policies. Why? Because no candidates have policy teams. They don't create policies. They only have communication teams.
Right.
That's all they have. Right. They don't have policy teams.
It's comms and it's finance. Yeah.
Correct. That's all it is.
That's it.
Yes. I'm one of the only guys who has a policy team. So I get people from the left and the right to come to me because they're like, I need to come up with some policies, right? One of the reasons why Roger Meadows follows me is I picked up his public banking policy concept. I'm going to put a policy up on that coming up here soon. And also the idea of ballot initiatives. No one else will pick it up. I will. And Roger's not a libertarian. He's not. He'll tell you he's not a libertarian at all, but he knows I will create policy. So I get people like him and others to come to me for that reason, because you're exactly right, Keaton. No one's talking about it. I thought if I did, it would work. My hope still to this day, and there's still some naivete in me, I guess, but I'm optimistic, is that somebody will actually go, you know what? We need some policies. Let's go to Larry Sharp's website and steal them and have some conversations.
That's part of why we do what we do here. That's part of the mission of independent media, is to give these ideas a hearing in the hopes, and I would argue in the knowledge, that we will eventually become more relevant than the mainstream media.
Yes.
Like we will, like
right.
it's a matter of time before. Now that might not happen before we die. So I don't want to make people too hopeful about this, but that will at some point happen, right? I mean, as communication is increasingly democratized, these sorts of voices will become mainstream. Right. Now there are going to be all kinds of obstacles to that. The big tech censorship is obviously one of the big ones that they're throwing in our face now, but you really can't, I don't really think you can bottle this energy up long term. So I think at a certain point, we will become more relevant than the CNNs and the New York Times, and we will be able to give these ideas a hearing. Joe Rogan, in a large sense, already is, right?
Yep.
So, that's where there is some hope. But that's the point of doing this. The point of doing this is not to convince people that there's this great victory right around the corner and we just have to rally everybody right now. The point of doing this is to, as Russell said earlier, start a conversation about where do we want to go long term.
Yes.
What ideas are worth preserving, which are worth throwing out. Like, that's the point of these sorts of conversations. That's what makes these platforms very, very useful. So I don't think you're naive in thinking that you will get a hearing. You just might not get a hearing anytime soon. But in doing this, you are working to move the ball forward and perhaps pass the baton to whoever's next, whoever has time to actually make a real difference.
Let me do a little bit of admin if I could. Guys, again, if you like the hearing, do me a favor, click that like button. It does matter. Get past the algorithms. Please click the like button. It does matter. If you are on Twitter, please retweet this so others can see this. It does matter tremendously. Thank you all for super chats. I'll get to some other comments coming up in a moment. If you want to support the show directly, you can. Patreon.com/Sharpway. $10 a month goes a long way to keep this going if you don't mind. But more importantly, two guys came here. They're giving us some love. Please give them some love in return. Follow them on Twitter and or subscribe to them on YouTube. It's Due Dissidence. They do tons of content. I see it all the time. Lots of good content, fun stuff, right? It's not as fun as my stuff, clearly, but it's almost there. They're close. They're close. They're almost there. So still,
we have a fun one tomorrow coming up. A lot of fun stuff tomorrow.
They're going to have a fun one. I love that. Please do that if you can. Let me grab a couple of comments if I could. A bunch of people give me some comments. I want to be good to some of them. Pete does this for me all the time. The national debt, 31,988,658,765.75. And he does this so we don't forget. Thank you again, Pete, for doing that. So yes.
A lot of Chick-fil-A's.
Yes. Christopher says, Democrats and Republicans are two parts of the same broken system who deem it more important to fight the other side rather than actually represent their constituents. I cannot tell you how true that is. And again, I'll go back to AOC, and I have a personal issue because she's my congressperson, right? And I always give her credit because She busted her rump for the seat the first time. They knocked on my door. Like, I'm not joking.
Russell may have knocked on your door. He knocked on doors for AOC the first time.
Yes, absolutely. When she had a work ethic that was thoroughly impressive.
I collected signatures.
Oh,
there we go. 100%. I was very impressed by that. Thoroughly impressed. Now, I feel like she's just one of them.
Oh,
She didn't care about it.
Oh, yeah. But I have it on good authority. She's going to throw Pelosi down the exhaust pipe in the Death Star at the end of the movie.
We can only hope.
It's going to be later on.
Does she have to have her hand cut off? I don't know if she has to have a hand cut off. I'm not sure. So yeah. Mika says, even if we ditch the parties, almost everyone feels they are somewhere on the left/right continuum. I used to be left, but government is so corrupt and disgusting. I want smaller local government. I do think that's true that most people will still lean left or lean right. But I feel like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like even if you lean left or lean right, it doesn't mean you wouldn't vote for someone who you thought was right for you if they didn't happen to be of the right party. Am I wrong here?
No, I don't think so.
I think things are, no, go ahead, Kate.
No, you go.
I think things are more partisan than they used to be. It's funny. I was just thinking of that. Larry, you probably remember this. I don't know what your politics were at the time. I often talk about myself as a reformed neoliberal because, Gen Xers who came of age with Bill Clinton, there was very much this feeling that he had solved the riddle of politics, right? I
agree.
It's hard to imagine now, but there was this feeling like he had worked it out. The triangulating, all of that. And look, it was very easy for us to feel that way because you had so many prominent black politicians who would come out and say, no, he's great for us too. So it wasn't just we're better.
He was the first black president. Remember that?
Right. You had who was that? Maya Angelou who said that? Was that Maya Angelou who said it?
He played the saxophone on Arsenio Hall.
He played the saxophone. And look, we were having the peace dividend from after the Cold War. So you had military bases closing. You had a budget surplus. It looked like it all worked.
You had moved to don't ask, don't tell in the military. When I was in the Marine Corps, you couldn't be openly gay. They would throw you out. You couldn't be gay in the Marine Corps or let anyone know. I mean, obviously there were gay people in the Marine Corps, but you couldn't let them know.
Right.
They would throw you out. He actually moved to don't ask, don't tell, which was an improvement. I mean,
it was an improvement over what was there. So it was very easy to feel like, and you remember, I mean, I think of the anthem of that decade as right here, right now, right? It was, that was the mood. Like this is the end of history, right? We're waking up from the end of history. Now, what they didn't tell you is basically a German Shepherd could have been president at the dawn of the internet and there would have been a booming economy. It had absolutely nothing to do with Clinton's policies. He was the luckiest motherfucker ever in that office because actually his policies should have tanked the economy by all rights. But it's the internet. It's the internet. Millions of new computers, new fiber optic cables, millions of jobs that go with it, an entire reshape. It's TV, it's radio, it's the automobile. There were booming economies at the invention of all of those technologies. But we connected it with neoliberal policy. We thought that was why. And they sold us on the idea that was why. And we saw black incomes improving along with white incomes, right?
I gotta tell you,
we thought Clinton had solved it.
I saw that as a group. You're right. But I got to tell you, by the second term of Clinton, I was like, why don't we have Ross Perot? That's where my head was. I was like, why don't we have Ross Perot? I was a Perot guy at that point because I was like, this guy's not doing it because they were still throwing cops into my neighborhoods and putting people in jail, right? That was still happening, right? So I was like, let's get Perot because the thing that Trump did well and that Perot also was able to do well is why people kept calling Trump racist. His policies were not anti-black. In fact, they were, I don't care. That's what their policy was towards black people. They're like, I don't care. You got a job. Shut up. That's was Trump's policy. That was Perot's policies. I don't care. You got a job. Shut up. That was his policy. And most black people were like, I can handle that. Yes, that will be fine. Thank you. We're happy to take that. And I think that's why you find so many black men, relatively, still a small percentage, shifted towards Trump.
You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that. They were like, oh, he just wants to give me a job. Okay, done. I like that policy. That's good. Let's do that. That's kind of where he went to. I think Perot had a similar thing. That's what Nader could never do. I was also a Nader guy. I was the rebel guy the whole time. So I was a Nader guy also. But I was Nader because I thought he was the rebel. I thought he was not them. But Nader could never do what Perot did. It didn't even come close.
Yeah, I was such an in the tank shit lib back then. I'm always embarrassed to tell this story. If you remember the night of the Gore Bush election, first they call it for Gore, then they call it for Bush. And I don't know how well you know the East Village. I watched the election at Doc Holliday's on Avenue A.
Oh, okay.
So, I'm there all night, and they call for Gore, they call it for Bush, and then they uncall it.
Yes.
And I go back. I owned a theater then. I go back to the theater to continue drinking at the bar in the building. And I run into a guy with a Nader button on 2nd Avenue and 4th Street. I ripped that poor guy a new asshole.
Of course.
Do you see what you did, you stupid motherfuckers? God damn it!
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Wherever that guy is, I apologize.
Hopefully he's watching now. And he's like, oh, good.
I'm sure he's in the audience. It's that guy.
Sure right now he's watching.
I'll never forget that face.
Yes,
I was in a depression for 6 months after that.
No, I was the same way. I mean, I was younger. I have, I guess, a better excuse than Russ, but I was 13. I was in 8th grade when that happened. Mm-hmm. And the day after the election, my 8th grade history teacher was talking about the results. And given how close it was in Florida, I just blurred out in the classroom. I say, so given how close it was, how could anybody be so stupid to vote for Ralph Nader since he had no chance to win? My 8th grade teacher says, I voted for Ralph Nader.
No.
Nice. You had a base teacher, as the kids would say.
I did have a base teacher, but you're talking about wanting to disappear into your chair. You're talking about like, oh shit, did I step in that?
F for you, Keaton.
Yeah, right,
F
exactly,
for you.
yeah.
F for you. Absolutely. That's good. Lars Mapstead, by the way, who's running for president for the LP presidential nomination here coming up here next May. He says, Pence is announcing, and there is some new Trump news on hiding documents. Trump lost before, and he will lose again if he is the nominee. So
that I actually don't agree
side.
with. Oh, no. I actually think any Republican will beat the Democratic field. So I think so. Oh, yeah. It's not that I don't think Trump will win. I think with DeSantis, it would be a blowout. If you put DeSantis up against Biden, he will freaking murder him. He will destroy Joe Biden.
So you think no matter what, Republicans win the presidency in 2024?
Absolutely. Although I think
probably
because
the favorite,
of Roe,
but I think it's close. I couldn't predict with any confidence that race either way. I think Trump goes into it the favorite, but there's no doubt Trump is the higher risk candidate as the nominee for sure. Not only is Pence declaring next week, I think Chris Christie is in now. He said he's running.
Oh, yeah, he's in too. Yep.
Yeah.
You don't think that the Democrats aren't going to say, if you let a Republican win, they're going to outlaw abortion?
Well, that's what I would
say.
That was the next thing I was going to say. I think because of Roe, you get a split decision. I think they leave the House or they leave the Senate to the Democrats to block a Roe, the outlawing of Roe. But there is absolutely no fucking way that Joe Biden wins a second term, and they got no bench. Who would they replace him with? Kamala? And if they don't, how are they going to explain that to their black female base?
I mean, his numbers are really just imploding now. I mean, there was a poll that came out on CNN that said 66% of all voters think that a second Biden term would either be bad or disastrous, a setback or a disaster for the country. 66%.
I mean,
when the same question was asked
won with
of
those
Trump,
kind of numbers?
Well, the same question was asked of Trump. It was only 56, which said setback or nightmare. So
hold on now, Russell. Come on now. Let's think about how Democrats work, right? Just the Democrats, how parties work. If the parties actually think, if they believe you, right? They think we have no shot. Aren't they going to coax someone? They did it in 2008. They thought Hillary might lose, so they coaxed Obama to step in.
Yeah,
Obama became the savior.
There's no Obama.
There's
no
Gavin
Obama.
Newsom, the handsome man from California.
Listen.
He's even better looking than we are. I mean, that's impressive.
That's true.
I don't think there's a Republican strategist in the country who doesn't want to run against California. They would love to be showing videos of the encampments at Santa Monica all through the election.
Well, then why don't they grab
they would love it if they grab
Republican? What's that guy, Larry Hogan from Maryland? They grab a left-leaning Republican, they slap Democrat on him, and they go, he's one of us. They do that, right? They slap Democrat on him, and he's one of us. Always been one of us. Look at that.
Well, I think they feel like, first of all, it's going to be very difficult for them to get somebody credible to run in Biden's place, because whoever does that does so knowing that the Democrats open the race admitting failure. And when you open the race admitting failure, you really handicap whoever that candidate is. So Gavin Newsom, whose eyes have been set on the White House for decades at this point, is he going to waste his one shot at it this time? Like, is he going to have to step in and take the ball out of the bullpen from Joe Biden and run where the Democrats are already playing a weak hand? No, the only person who they could get to try this is someone who was never really serious about being president anyway, and they're not going to win either. So I think, their strategy is, we're going to act like Biden for all his faults, got things done, and they're hoping that Trump is the Republican nominee and they could just ride that negative partisanship into a victory. I can't imagine it working, but at the same time, I can't imagine anything else being really a better idea. Like, what are they going to swap him out for somebody and start the race being like, yeah, no, we know this. We know our party is a disaster. We know we're in shambles. We know that our incumbent is too much of a failure and too incompetent to run again.
No. They just change the narrative.
Him the ball. Like, that's it. Yeah.
They go to Biden and go, you're sick. Shh, you're sick. He says, yes, I'm sick.
It's too late.
So I can't run.
They'd have had to do that a year ago,
and that's that done. It could be done. I'm not saying I'm not saying they will do it.
Even if they do it, they have no bench. They have no bench. Who are they going to run? Fuck it. Look, in their wisdom, I wouldn't put it past them to try to run Mayo Pete.
They might try that. That's possible.
But it's not going to work. If there is any political party that has ever been fucking stupid enough to run that psychopathic empty suit for president, it would be them. But I mean, that's the quality of people they have.
Sure.
Roger says, Bernie 2016, anti-Wall Street guy, Trump anti-immigration guy, both anti-trade guys. Bernie 2020, Bernie, Medicare for all guy. Larry run on one thing and one thing only, and empower New York to ratify the amendments. That's it, and I win. So I hope he's right. That sounds very simple. I hope he's right.
And fix the East Side bike path, please.
But here's the best part, though, right here.
What's up?
Biden president, Feinstein vice president. Perfect. Oh my God, perfect. You couldn't get a better ticket. I agree, Nancy. No. The best ticket ever. I'm in. Let's do that one. Yes, old and older.
Their slogan will be "Eat your vegetables."
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Last big thing I want to bring up.
Sure.
Is this left or right divide that's getting deeper and deeper? Is that what's creating these radicals, right? The people who are shooting up schools, the people who are, marching on the Capitol, the people who are putting Nazi flags and stuff, right? Are we not meaning me and you, but meaning we as a nation and this left, right, are we just creating fascists and Nazis because people just get sick and go, the left is so evil, I got to be a Nazi. The right is so evil, I have to be a fascist. Are we just riling people up so much that they go down these horrible rabbit holes on the internet and they wind up radicalizing themselves and become fascists or Nazis or whatever the case may be? Is this our culture's fault?
I think that's true to a large extent, but I think you have to look at polarization as a function of a rotted out center, right? When the center cannot satisfy the demands of people, right? When the center is unworkable, that creates radical fringes. It does. I mean, why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it? When the system becomes so captured and so corrupt that no progress is possible, no movement is possible, there's no longer an incentive for people to get along with each other or hear each other out. There's no incentive for mass numbers of people, unfortunately for you, Larry, to watch a show like this or like ours where we try to engage people, because what's the payoff? You're not getting anything for it anyway, because no progress through the political system is possible. So people act like polarization is what creates this gridlock. I think it's the opposite. I think gridlock creates polarization. I think corruption and capture of the system by a status quo that simply will not change because it's already bought and paid for 1,000 times over by the time we get to chime in on it with our little votes, right? That creates polarization because it eliminates the incentive for understanding. It eliminates the incentive for cooperation. And mutual respect, even, and so that's where I think the big cause of it.
That's my biggest issue. Respect. Go ahead, Russell. Sorry.
I think on a libertarian show, we've been in a lot of agreement that this is where I'm going to have an economic analysis that we may disagree on. I think it's largely a failing of capitalism. If you look at the food that's sold in America, when people come from other countries, they're shocked and disgusted. They can't even eat our food because they have laws where they won't even allow a lot of the things that we put in our food. There are European countries where the McDonald's hamburger it is defined as cake because if you have that amount of sugar in it, you have to call it cake. When you have an unregulated or largely out of control capitalist system, people are going to go towards certain things that are unhealthy, like sugar, right? Because it's very rare to get that in the wild. So we're programmed to want it.
Let me give you a little bit of pushback.
So capitalism is going to give you more of it than you should have. I think that's true of our media and cultural environment.
Capitalism doesn't give us this. Government subsidies does. The reason why there's sugar in everything is because the government subsidizes everything. The government decides. The government put the pyramid up, which told us to eat garbage. The government told us these things are good because they subsidize them.
They didn't really tell us to eat cake and candy.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yes.
Come on. That was like meat, bread.
Yes,
fish.
Which is cake.
Well, bread was the bottom.
Yes. That was everything. They said the biggest thing was to
But they
eat
put
bread.
junk food at the top where you're not supposed to eat junk food.
They
said made a distinction between wheat bread and cake.
They then took, they then took sugar or corn syrup, which comes from corn, which you subsidize,
and they put it in everything. Yeah, everything.
I would argue without those subsidies, there would not be corn syrup in everything. We wouldn't have cake in everything. We wouldn't have sugar in anything. Not just that, the government is the one saying right now that fat is bad when fat is not bad. The government is the one saying that all these things are bad. They're not bad. In fact, let people eat what they want to eat. People tend to eat healthier. When government does zoning, which makes sure that I have a food desert in my freaking bad neighborhood because of zoning and because of the war on drugs, well, of course I have crappy food in that neighborhood because no one else wants to open up a store in that neighborhood because of the war on drugs. So I would argue the reverse is true. Government is what made this bad.
I mean, but why are they doing those subsidies? What corporations put money in their pockets and into their
of course
to get them to do those subsidies. Yes. So again, you're talking about an out of control system. Again, you're talking about capitalism. Well, that is capitalism out of control. That's these corporations have enough money to stuff it into the pockets of these politicians. In Europe, they pass laws against these things.
Let me give you a nudge again, if I may. A nudge. There's a reason why these large corporations are able to do what they do. And that's because of corporate capture. How can they capture it? Because they create regulations that destroy the little guy so no Davids can come up to fight the Goliaths.
Right. But
so the Goliaths control everything. But
I'm
not even done with that. I'm not even done with that.
All right,
Next thing is you have a two-party system, left-right, which ensures that no one like me who come up and change things has a chance of doing anything. You talked about RFK running independently. He can't unless he runs libertarian. There will be no chance. The system is set up to where there is literally no one who can get 50-state ballot access except maybe Libertarian Party. Literally, it is impossible.
What about
to
the
make happen.
Greens? What about the Greens?
No, if the Greens are lucky, they'll get 25 states. If they're lucky, they get 25. The Green Party's basically broken across the country. In New York State, it's non-existent, right? I know Howie Hawkins. I know them all. They're basically broken. If they fight hard, they might get 40. Forward has given up. They're not even going to try this year. They cannot do it. No Labels Party, they can't do it either. There will either be a libertarian as
I wanted to vote for Manchin,
or there will be nobody. Manchin can't do it either. It is impossible. That is a system that has happened. So while I get your capitalist piece, I understand it. And there is validity there to being out of hand. Agreed. But it's out of hand, not because capitalism is innately bad. It's out of hand because government has shaken hands with it in a system that ensures that it must be bad.
Right, but the reason government has shaken hands with it is because capitalism allows these corporations to grow to such an extent that they buy a seat at the table with the government and they consume the government. So that is a function of capitalism.
That's it.
It sounds like what you're advocating for are markets. And as a socialist, basically, I'm for markets too. Markets are not unique to capitalism. Markets predate capitalism. Markets will exist long after capitalism goes away. And so markets are fine. But capitalism is the exponential accrual of capital using already existing capital. There is no self-correcting mechanism within capitalism. Because that's why it's called capitalism. Because the more capital you gain, the easier it is to use that capital to gain even more capital. It's a lot easier to build your net worth from 9 million to 10 million than it is to increase your net worth from 900 to 1,000. Because when you're at $900, you're always chasing that next bill and that next check. So as you grow and grow and grow, like I said, there is no self-correcting mechanism there. Eventually, it consumes the state. Eventually, you run into the problem of corporatism because eventually capital becomes so powerful, and this is not my idea, this is what Marx said. He said, eventually they will become the treasury. They will consume the treasury. They will devour the treasury. They will cannibalize the entire system. So it is a function of capitalism in my view, and I think a lot of people, because I saw Kenneth, someone in the Facebook chat, said corporatism is different from capitalism. No, corporatism, in my view, is the logical extension of capitalism. It is the inevitable result of capitalism.
So I have to ask this question.
Are different from capitalism.
And let me just say, because we got caught up in the sugar thing, and actually that was just my prelude. What I'm really talking about is the media environment. Because look, we did have a regulated media. Reagan took the first step in getting rid of it. And then Bill Clinton completely deregulated.
He finished it all off. I agree.
And what is the result? Because you were asking about culture. In my opinion, okay, once you turned over news to complete capitalist incentives, okay, well, people want sugar, right? They want drama. They want to be what gets people's eyeballs. We're primates. We are programmed to look for threats. So you want to keep people constantly angry and in a state of fear and threat. That is what happened when we stopped imposing regulations on the capitalist impulses of the news industry. Once you unleash those impulses, it is a major part of what, in my opinion, has destroyed our culture. It's destroyed our civilization.
So let me, if I could ask two things, because here's where people, when we have this conversation, often get some confusion. How do you define, or how do you not define, or how do you decide what is capitalism, what socialism is? If you ask someone will say, well, socialism is when the government controls everything. And someone will say, well, socialism is when the people own the means of production. What is you say you want markets. Great.
Sure.
When I think of socialism, I think of socialism of the past, right? I think of the Soviet Union. I think of, communist China. I think of Cuba, Venezuela. That's what I think of.
Sure.
But many socialists tell me that's not real socialism. I always say that all the time. That's not real socialism. It's not how it actually works. Blah, blah, I hear it all the time. So tell me, is that socialism, or is there something else I'm missing?
All right, well, look, I'm going to start by pussying out a little bit. I would say, because I tend to avoid these labels as much as possible. I tend more towards socialism than capitalism, because I think we ought to work backwards from the premise that labor is entitled to all that it creates. Now, obviously...
You believe that?
Yes. Now, obviously, when I say work backwards from that, there has to be some room for profit so that there is room for some growth so that you can actually have a society that can actually scale itself, right? I'm not saying every single grocery store has to be a worker-run co-op, right? I'm not saying that. But I'm saying you work backwards from the idea that the people who do the work, who actually deliver the good or the service to the person who buys it, they are entitled to as much of that money that is generated from that transaction as can possibly be given to them. Capitalism, wealth is created by not labor. Wealth is not created by labor under capitalism. Wealth is created by accruing capital and then using that capital to build more capital. This whole railroad strike that we just had, right? The railroad workers were saying, hey, listen, the people who are least invested in the success of the railroad company are the workers because we stand to gain the least from it. The people who are getting rich off this are not people who have anything to do with running the fucking trains. They're people who invest in the company that makes the trains, people who basically bet millions of dollars
let me touch some of this
that this train company is going to outperform the other train company. But the people actually doing it are not invested in it because they're not reaping the benefits of it. In fact, they're getting fucked over by it.
So let me give you two things. What you're talking about, I'll touch the railroad and the other thing. The railroad. Sure. The railroad is basically socialism. It is run by the government, with a government union. They're all unionized, and it's monopoly, which is why socialism fails. It's a monopoly. That's the problem. Now, hold on. Let me finish. You did a lot. Sure, I'm going to tell you how you could have solved this. How could you have solved this? It's a very simple answer. You make a very simple law, simplified laws. I'm not saying no laws. I'm not an anarchist. That's not who I am. It's a simplified law. You say, if you're going to drive your trains on any tracks that cross any state lines at all, the company must be insured, or you are responsible for all damages. Period. That's the law. Any damages, you're responsible, done. No EPA coming in to save you, because the EPA saves companies from damages. It doesn't support us, it supports companies. Again, government stepping in, making companies happy, not people. That's it. What would happen? Insurance companies would now have to check things. When insurance companies check things, what do? They go, wait a minute, you have to have updated brakes. Why? Because if you don't, we're not going to insure you. Your people say you have to be 3 people on train, not 2. You better have 3, or we're not going to insure you. How do I know that will work? It already does. It works in cases like health insurance. Health insurance gives a company a break if you do the right things. They incentivize the companies to do the right thing. Why? Because they care about people? No, because they care about money, capital. Capitalism actually incentivizes you appropriately. I'll even go to health food stores. Health food stores, not regulated by the government. The healthiest people you know shop in those stores, and they're not regulated by the government. And you don't get those sugar you talked about, Russell. That's not in health food stores.
Those people look a little waxy to me.
Yeah, but they're not like the people in the other stores. They're not. They're better off from those health food stores. They absolutely are. So what you're basically saying is, okay, labor matters, but you have to make profit. So as usual, what I hear constantly, socialism is awesome once you add capitalism. That's how it always works. Socialism by itself fails constantly because it becomes monopoly. And once you have monopoly, it fails. Monopoly never works well. Ask the veterans from the VA.
Capitalism also becomes monopoly, I would argue. But Russell, go ahead. You were
I mean, Keaton's probably a little left of me. A lot of people on our show are confused about what my politics are. Listen, I signed up for the Sanders campaign. I signed up for the Sanders agenda. Okay. I believe that there are certain public goods that should be universal. I believe that healthcare is a right. I don't believe it's a privilege. I don't believe you should have to pay for it. I believe that public colleges and universities should be tuition free in the modern world. However, coming from a working class background, I fully agree with those who usually are on the right, not always though, or defined as being on the right, who feel that we're putting people through college for no good reason other than to enrich the universities. Most of the people in college, that was my experience when I went to college. I was shocked by how much these people didn't belong in college, didn't want to be in college, weren't enriched by college. It's because
the government pays for college. That's the reason. Yet again, government stepping in, making it bad. Yet again.
I think
if you hold on, I'm going to give you an actual college.
Look, hold on,
I'm going to give you an actual answer.
Wait, you're talking
to
somebody who could not have gone to college without that help.
What I'm telling you is,
I belonged in college. I was into it.
I'm going to give you an actual answer. I'm not just going to tell you theory.
All right.
You want to make the colleges better? Almost all of these colleges have some form of fund already, endowment or something like that. Almost all of them have something like that, right? So if they are a private college with some kind of endowment, take that endowment, and now that becomes your financial institution that you will now finance everyone's college tuition. They either pay cash or you finance it. Just like car dealers do it right now. You go to a car to buy a car, the car dealership, they're the ones who finance it, not the bank, the company itself. Ford finances all their own cars. So does Honda. They all do. They all finance their own cars. Make the college finance its own college tuition, because if it does that, they better give you a good degree. Otherwise, you're not paying them, and they're not getting paid. This will get college to be good,
and
lower the prices.
That would basically eliminate the humanities from university programs.
Not at all. No, you're incorrect, because people want humanities. It would make humanities cheaper.
That's a good bet. The guy who gets a painting degree, you're going to give that person a loan?
That's why it will be cheaper. A humanities degree will be cheaper, while a computer science degree will be more expensive, as it should be. The guy going to MIT should pay more than the guy going to some local college for his degree in liberal arts. It will be cheaper.
Why are they going to bother to even offer that degree if they can't make as much money offering
Because people want it. That's why. Because people want it. When people want degrees, they get it.
People want a lot of things, but if it's not really profitable
and they get them.
for the
when
business
you leave the government out, they get them.
Why would they not just focus on business, law, medicine?
Because
why would they bother with the painting program that they have to charge 1/10 of what they charge for those degrees?
I will tell you why. It's a great question. They're doing it now. You find ways of giving people what they want. That's what the market does. You will get what you want, and it will be cheaper. This happens every time. I'll give you another perfect example. These are examples I'm going to give you. Look at the medical community that's non-essential. Things like LASIK eye surgery, cosmetic dentistry, body enhancements, things like that. In every single case, the price has gone down, the service has gone up, accessibility has gone up, and they're not regulated by the government anywhere near essential medical services. Not even close. The regulation relatively is low. And these are serious places. People get general anesthesia, people could die, these are operations. Where are all the deaths compared to regular hospitals?
You wake up in the middle of Honduras, missing a kidney.
If you want to go there, but if you could also do it here in America. Yes.
No, I know.
But missing a kidney is not a non-essential. That's essential. That's my point. The essential stuff here is garbage, so they go to Honduras. The non-essential they can afford to get here. When you pull government out, almost always, you will find a better answer. How do I know that? You see it. Look at private schools now. Private schools now are cheaper than public schools and give you a better education. It's an absolute fact.
Okay, but Larry, if you look at the rest of the Western world,
Please.
we have worse outcomes in education. We have worse outcomes in health. And those countries have much more generous social programs along the lines of what Bernie Sanders was articulating. Australia,
and they're not all top-down government run either. Like there are still private doctor practices in the UK and all that stuff. Yeah, exactly.
I'm married to an Australian. Australia regularly ranks the happiest place in the world with the best quality of life regularly. When it's not Australia, it's usually a Scandinavian country like Norway.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm not against any of this stuff.
Sentence. Okay.
What
you're not against any of that stuff. Okay.
What I'm against is the Bernie style Medicare for all. I get rid of private insurance. If you want to have a public option, I'm not against the public option. But here's the reality, what these guys actually want. Everyone who's up top who says Medicare for all, they don't want Medicare for all. They want Medicare for them. They all have private doctors. I live in New York City. None of these rich people they all go to private doctors.
You would still have private you could still have private doctors under a Medicare.
That's
for all.
not like
in Australia, you can pay for supplemental insurance.
No, it's not even a supplemental
insurance. You can do that in England too.
It's not even supplemental
most
insurance.
Most of Europe has supplemental insurance. And I'm fine with that. If you're going to allow a dual system, I'm good. I'm not against that.
No, but even under a non-dual system,
Yes.
you'd still have private practices. The doctors would still not be government employees. Even in the UK, right. even under the NHS, you still have private practices, even though that is the most sort of doctrinaire, socialized sort of medicine system in Europe.
Bernie,
they still have private practices. Sure.
Would you have private insurance? He said no.
Well, the reason why they
I'm
don't...
not okay with that.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, fine. The reason why they don't have a private insurance in Europe, the reason why it exists mostly as a supplemental, and it varies by state, right? It varies by, different nations have it set up, slightly differently. The reason you buy supplemental insurance is to cover elective processes. In other words, in many cases, the supplemental insurance does not cover the same thing. So if you need a colonoscopy, only the NHS will cover the colonoscopy. You can't get private insurance to cover the same stuff as the public insurance, because the idea is that rich people will always jump the line because the providers will always service the private plans first, because the private plans are more expensive. They pay them better. So that's why you have that sort of dual setup. All right. I mean, I could literally talk to you for hours about all of this stuff, and it's fantastic to talk to you.
Yeah, but you have to go. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. No. That's fine. It's fine. I mean, I don't have to go. I could go to the pharmacy tomorrow. They open early. That's called a market incentive on their part. But anyway.
That market works, brother. Works for you.
Look.
Market works for you.
I think more broadly, if we are going to wrap fairly soon, more broadly, what you're talking about rightly is you're identifying a corporate capture of the system, right? You're saying, well, correct. Capitalism works, but the problem is government gets involved. Well, government gets involved on whose behalf? It gets involved on behalf of organizations that have accrued enough capital to buy the government, right? Yep. So you would admit that that's a problem. Okay.
Yes.
Now, I would argue that is an inevitable outcome of capitalism, right? Unless you put in place...
Give it the answer.
Go ahead.
I actually have policy answers for this.
Sure.
If the government can't regulate, then the government can't be bought. If instead regulation is made by a private sector, then it cannot be bought as a government can be bought. It must answer to the market, which is a better chance of it answering. As example I'll give you. Again, I always have examples of this.
That's fine.
An example is the movies system, the ratings of the movies, right? The movie system is not regulated by the government. It's regulated by the Motion Picture Association.
Mm-hmm.
And they make changes. They went from PG to PG-13, blah, blah, blah.
Of course.
They will make changes in a shift based upon how the market and the people want. Government only changes when the people who are bribed change it. Otherwise, they don't change.
Right. Okay, so for the sake of time, I will accept that premise fully. Okay, so how do you then change the paradigm from a government that regulates according to the people with the most money and the most capital that can buy it and convince it to regulate it on their behalf? How do you change the system from a government that plays favorites and regulates in favor of certain actors to a government that, in your view, doesn't regulate at all, or regulates very, very
You didn't say that
minimally?
at all. I'm not an anarchist.
Okay,
not at all. I didn't
regulates at a much lower rate than it does now. How do you do that? How do you change that government? You change that government, I assume, since you run for office, you change that government through popular will, right?
Yes.
You change that government through organizing people into collective action, right? To make the country a more democratized space.
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough. So you want a more democratized political space. And you think that the result of a more democratized political space is a more democratized economic space.
Which is why I get along with some people on the far left.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Well, that's where I am sort of trying to sort of land here. We believe on the left in a more democratized economic space as well.
Me too.
And that's why these conversations happen, right?
Yep.
Because you're taking a different route to it. But you're landing at in a sort of common area with people like us who believe that the economy has to function more democratically than it does now.
Agreed.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
Which is why another policy I had, which is another that Roger actually liked in this regard, which is Democrats will talk about co-ops. I'll actually have policies to actually get people to have co-ops. right? We should have a law in New York State, at least, that says when a company goes bankrupt, there's a 30-day waiting period, which gives a right of first refusal for the employees to buy the company. That's completely in the market. That's totally libertarian. Before the vultures come in, give the people a chance to buy their own company. But not just that. They'll need capital for that, right? Most people aren't going to have the capital to buy the company. No worries. What we do instead is now the government says, do I owe anybody any money? Do I owe you from disability? Do I owe you from a settlement? Whatever. I'm prepared to give all of that money up front as long as you and at least 5 people get together to purchase the company. All the money the government will owe you, it takes up front to make that buy. But not just that. We have a public bank, which has a localized credit union. That credit union, which is usually run by local businesses, will then support that same amount. So if the government gives you 100 grand, they match 100 grand. You can now buy the business. The workers now own it. That can be done. That's totally libertarian. No extra money at the government. No extra control. None. The government just says, go, buy, do. I'm out of your way. As long as the bank okays, and all that matters is the credit union okays the business plan. If the credit union okays the business plan, we're done. You're good. Take your money. Go do your thing. That's the way to support co-ops.
Larry, I don't think a lot of people on the left would think that these are bad ideas.
Not at all. They love them.
And we have a very viewpoint diverse audience, and some of our audience are communists. Sometimes they're called tankies in our community.
Yes.
On occasion, and I have debated with them very often because I share your skepticism of state control.
Yes.
Perhaps not necessarily on the same basis, or perhaps it is. I get the impression you're a sci-fi guy like myself, Larry.
I am.
And I've watched too much dystopian sci-fi to not be deeply skeptical of a state controlling the economy without any counterpoint within that economy to work against it. Now, this is something that conservatives will often articulate. They'll argue, well, you need the private sector to counter the power of government. That's the whole purpose of it. And that is why my line is basically the Bernie agenda, because anything beyond that, you need a level of state control that I am not comfortable with.
I agree.
When you look at the psychos who very often are the political activists advocating for this, my response to them is often, I wouldn't trust you guys to run a corner lemonade stand, much less to put you in charge of me. I wouldn't want you guys running a dog pound.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
I share that skepticism.
I absolutely want to bring more people in. I do believe, and to your point, Keaton, you said, once the big companies take over, what's the mechanism to get rid of them? The market's the only mechanism. When the government's in control, what fixes the government? Only violence. I don't want violence, right? I want the market. The market can fix itself. It does happen, right? The biggest companies of 20 years ago aren't the same as this year. The biggest company 100 years ago aren't the same. There has been swap, change. It has happened. Nowhere near as good as it could have happened. I'm agreed. I'm not saying it's great, but it has. Government has simply grown stronger, tighter, stronger, tighter. It has not gotten weakened at all. The only thing that stops government is violence.
I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that because look, I gave you the example of our news industry.
Mm-hmm.
The government at one time very tightly regulated it. They no longer do. I mean, the story since Reagan has been a process of deregulation of
also, I got to be very clear on this.
Services, and I think we can both agree that the media we've gotten as a result is worse than the media that we had.
Yes,
and I believe that's tearing society apart.
My only issue is tightly. There were two things the government did, which I'm not against either of them. Number one was it breaks up monopolies. I have no problem with government doing that. None. I'm totally okay with that. Break them up. 100%.
Which is a regulatory power they have that they no longer exercise.
Correct.
I don't know if you know. Me and Keaton are both tour guides. And when I point out the old headquarters of Standard Oil down by Battery Park, and I'll often talk about that being the first company that was broken up under those laws. And I tell people, most of my clients are European. And I say we still have these laws, but they're not enforced. If they were enforced, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, all of these companies would be broken up. By the standards
monopoly
that
is not
they broke
good.
up Rockefeller, they would break up all of these companies.
I don't like government monopoly. I don't like private monopoly. Monopoly is a bad thing. Break them up. I don't have a problem at all. And that's one thing it did well. Other thing it simply said was, if you use public air, you must be fair.
Right.
They don't do that either.
They got rid of it. That started with Reagan.
My point being, I don't mind like, for example, banking regulation. I think getting rid of Glass-Steagall was terrible. Keep Glass-Steagall. The rest is okay. I like simple regulations. Just put Glass-Steagall in. Just do that. And I'd be okay. We can work from there. Let's deal with that.
So Larry, I mean, how much do you really disagree with us? Keaton may be a little further than I am, but do you really disagree with me? I mean, basically, I want to see the Sanders agenda. I feel there are certain basic public goods. Okay, so we disagree on the universities. You feel they should just be completely privatized. Although we don't completely disagree, because I do feel that the universities have become a scam, where because they know they can get that loan money.
Correct.
They're hooking in social workers for $250,000 because why not? Right? As long as the loan is guaranteed, why not?
The government is making it worse.
That you're right.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Let me grab if I could, a quick super chat if I could. Roger's back on. He says, New York Health Act goes further than Medicare for all by outlawing private health care in New York State, and the system would cover homeless, Bloomberg, and cover everything. Keep your doctor. I do not like that system of outlawing private health care. I do not believe it will cover homeless well at all. I think it will fail miserably. New York State's homelessness is a homeless industrial complex. It is a massive grift throughout the entire state in New York City. I think it's a terrible idea to cover homelessness. Homelessness has to be fixed by the private sector, as it has been done decently in Japan. It has to be that way. Private sector is the only way to deal with homelessness. There's no other way around it except for that. I'm sorry, you may disagree. I just wanted to bring that up because you did a super chat.
How do you deal with homelessness through the private sector?
Right now, the system fails because, again, it's a scam. The idea is to service the homeless, not to help them. That's the idea. Keep them homeless, keep them serviced. They don't deal with the idea of addiction or actual mental illness at all well. It's terrible. I have three different plans that I think can work. One of them is called the carrying caboose. The carrying caboose means every second train in MTA, the last car is a car to service people who are in trouble. That is sponsored by medical companies and or insurance companies, not by taxpayers. The cops know where they can bring people who are in trouble down there. It has Wi-Fi. There is private security, not cops, because many homeless people and people who are in trouble are scared of cops. So it's private security there. Oh, Russell, you're in trouble. Have a seat. Let me get your computer. Oh, did you have your meds? You didn't. Let me get you set up. Let me now do the paperwork required to get you in the system. People who are homeless very often, they can't deal with the system at all. They don't even know how to deal with it. They can't do the paperwork. They can't get into housing. It's impossible for them because they have issues they can't deal with. This person gets them in the system, gets them the meds, gets them back. That's piece one. That's not enough, but that's the piece that helps the people who are going to the subways. The next piece is you allow the private sector to create specific housing that is for people with specific issues, like, for example, homeless single moms or veterans who have PTSD or addiction problems or people with psychosis, things like that, which is happening already in other countries and also in the Bronx right now in New York City. Those are built by private companies. They get their own housing label on it, right? And they don't have things like what the government has to have, which is curfews and no drug laws. Well, if I'm an addict, I can't go to a homeless shelter because I can't get my drug. They don't have, I can't do it.
Hang on, isn't this the government funding this housing?
Not at all. It is sponsored by private companies, of course. Yeah,
why?
Like Ronald McDonald House.
What's their incentive? Oh, so they're doing it as a charitable gesture.
No, they're doing it for branding. They don't care about charity. They're doing it for branding.
All right, so like when you donate to PBS.
100%, same thing, doing it for branding. It's branding issues. Look, the reality of it is I don't think corporations are evil. I think they're apathetic. They don't care.
Well, another word for that is sociopathic.
Well,
they have no ethics. They have no
I will
morals.
accept that. So
it's like a shark. It just swims forward looking for something to eat.
So I can lure the shark into a better area, can't I? Yes, I'll lure the shark into a better area. If I give the corporation,
that's what the mayor and Jaws thought.
Well, they were wrong, but they wound up killing the shark. But anyway, the point being, if I get the corporation to do the right thing, then everybody's happy. The corporation spends more money to help out the poor people, and it gets the branding that it wants. Win-win. Why would I want to fight that? And no matter, I've already asked about it. This is something that corporations care about. They want it to work. They're totally okay with it. They're doing it already, but the government stops them because it is a racket. If the private sector steps in, the government can't spend the money and give jobs to their friends. Homelessness is a racket. You do those two things, you will see a change in homelessness. You will see it get better and better and better. Second piece, this happened during Bloomberg. There was actually a set of vehicles that would come around and they would park, and they were actually mobile showers. People who are in the homeless space, very often, if they want to get their life together, they haven't showered in 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. Well, now you have a place you can shower, change your clothes, free. Just come on and do it. Bloomberg shut it down because of parking issues. So instead, we put in bike paths instead of having spots for homeless people to take damn showers. Again, this is private sector. This was nonprofit. This was not government. Government has been failing at dealing with homelessness for literally decades. They failed. They're done. Let the private sector handle it. They'll be better. They will be better. That's my answer for homelessness. And again, if you don't like it, if you think I'm wrong, if I was in the debate stage in 2022 and 2018, we could have debated it. We could have actually had an answer. We could have talked about it.
We probably wouldn't have been invited.
Yes. But I would have come on your show and I would have talked about it anyway. So fine.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm sorry, I yapped away, but you put me on that. So I had to give you my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Almost always, I will have an actual private sector answer for almost any problem you throw at me. Almost anyone, I will have a private sector answer for it.
Right. To me, even accepting those premises and those arguments, to me, the ultimate riddle is, how do you remove the current incentives from the government when the current incentives in government are a result of certain interests becoming so bloated and so wealthy, so full of capital, that they have bought the system. So whether you're talking about healthcare, housing, homelessness, really, I mean, when you're talking about anything, you have that fundamental problem. And the problem of power is a permanent problem. It's a permanent problem. It's a problem that no system solves. So when Russell says I'm maybe further to the left than him, I don't know if it's that I'm further to the left than he is, or if it's just that I am sort of more accommodating or more tolerant of more radical views, because I come at this from the understanding that no matter what everybody's opinions are, you're going to settle upon some hybrid system of some kind anyway, because nobody is going to get all of what they want under any circumstance. And no matter what system you ultimately land on, to go back to the sort of black pill theme I was setting up earlier, all systems eventually fail, right? So there's the idea, well, communism doesn't work. No, certainly not. Guess what? No system works. Socialism doesn't work. Capitalism doesn't work. No system works. Everything organic dies. Everything made by man will eventually peak, and it will start to wither away, and it will die. So there is no utopian system. There's no one doctrinaire set of ideas that I advocate for so ruthlessly as to discredit everyone who doesn't share them.
But hold on, you asked me a specific question though. You asked me, you said, how do I make that shift? By still allowing them to make money in a different way, right? Corporations want to make money. Great, you can. You have a $1 billion budget in marketing already. You're spending someplace else, a multi-billion-dollar budget. You're spending someplace else. Spend it on these buildings. You will still have people say good things about you. You will still make your money. People will still buy your sneakers or whatever you want to buy. You'll still make money. Not just that. The people who are now working for a nonprofit and who are unhappy because a nonprofit is just a big grift, they'll be unhappy. But now they can work for a company that actually wants to make something happen, that actually wants to have success, that will judge them by success, not by service.
All right,
and when that happens, even those people will move to the private sector. But people are still working. So money's still being spent. People are still working, but now it's directed not in a grift. It's directed not in service. It's directing in results.
Look, the way you explain that sounds wonderful. You achieve that. The only way to achieve that is through organized collective political action.
Correct. Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I'm with you. We're together on this.
And our experience in history of what happens when you really just let corporations do what's in their best interests are 11-year-olds working in the mines. That's our experience with a world like that. So you can't really just let the corporations do what they want because their incentives are sociopathic.
I never said that. I said the opposite. I said shift them into the right place. I never said do what you want, and I never said that.
Well, I mean, government,
right thing.
Government.
But when they grow big enough, they give the state the incentive.
That's it.
they create incentives for the
all
states.
Get reversed.
Right. The incentives become flip flopped and perverted.
Look how fast you were talking about AOC. Look how long it took for her to become a shill.
The incentives become upended.
I'm trying to change the current system too.
Well, that we all agree on.
Let me do a quick thing here if I could. Long story short, says, can we get Curtis Sliwa on the stream sometime? I will reach out to Curtis.
I was thinking that.
I will reach out to Curtis. I saw him in a subway the other day. I'll reach to Curtis if he wants. I don't know if he wants to come on. But I will see if I can get him on. I can often get New York politicians on the show. Most of them know me from when I ran. I'll see if I can reach to Curtis. I'll see if he'll come on. I didn't think of asking him because he's not running again. But he might run again. I'll ask him.
Wasn't he running on like universal healthcare or something? Like something really out of left field? Keaton, do you remember? Like, didn't he have this?
Oh, Sliwa, he wasn't running on universal health care. He was running on housing for the homeless. He was also running on animal rights. That was his big thing.
That's right,
caring
animal
for
rights.
the animals.
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
Joe says he worked at his parents' small business when he was a kid from Facebook. So did I. My parents had a small mom and pop jewelry wholesale business, and they sold at retail shows and stuff like that. Again, I think that's markets, right? Which again, that's a different,
big fan.
Different.
He also goes on to say, Larry Puzik explained the grift known as Thrive NYC. So they probably know what that is, but Thrive NYC was basically about, was it $900 million? I think it was $800 or $900 million that went to our greatest mayor that we've ever had, de Blasio. I'm completely teasing, obviously, it was horrible. The greatest mayor we ever had, Bill de Blasio, who changed his name from Warren Wilhelm because he didn't want to sound German because of the amount of Jews who are in New York City. True story. He was born Warren Wilhelm.
Is that true?
100%. And then changed his name to Bill de Blasio. He anglicized Wilhelm, made it William, and took his mother's maiden name, de Blasio. But he was born Warren Wilhelm. He was German.
Interesting.
So he changed his name to run for politics.
Never heard that. Okay.
Absolutely, look it up. Absolutely true. So his wife ran Thrive NYC, and they were given $900 million, and she lost it. And we don't talk about that anymore. That's literally Thrive NYC. That's government. Here's $900 million, and we lost it.
All right.
That's not how private companies work, ever.
Once again, so what? Just to put a final button on the point that I've been sort of getting at is that you talk about collective action being needed to reverse the incentives as a way to safeguard this incentive structure so that the government is no longer incentivized to play favorites and regulate in favor of monopolistic forces, right?
Agreed.
In order to do that, you need to take democratic action, organized democratic action. Now, one thing, the final argument that I would just make here is that the only way to ensure that that organization remains democratic in nature is to keep the economic system democratic in nature, because otherwise, as outcomes become so polarized, you have a select few people who can now afford to maintain that action, and they eventually swallow the state. So Marx is not against wealth. He's against the undue influence of wealth on the political system. And one of the things he argues is that that is sort of an inevitable outcome of a certain obscene wealth gap, right?
Yes.
And it makes sense, right? Because the people who have a lot of capital, who have a lot of money, can then afford to direct certain efforts to influencing the system where people without such money and without such resources cannot. That's a big reason why we have what we have now. That's a big reason why so many people don't vote anymore, right? Because they just don't have the bandwidth to maintain interest in that system. The people who do are the people who can afford to. That's why you have such unrest in this country. You know, we live in such crazy times. Everybody says, oh, it's crazy out there. And it is crazy out there because people are going crazy. The system is coming apart at the seams. Yet politically, electorally speaking, there's no conversation of any real change. We talked about that at the top
Agreed.
of the show, right? The system is just totally paralyzed. But it's paralyzed. Why? Because the people participating in it are the people who are comfortable within it. They're comfortable within it. Why? Because they have enough money to be comfortable within it. And so
power,
you have
both.
right. And so you have a decaying democratic system because participation is determined by people's position within that system. Now, what you're talking about is democratizing the whole process, which you hope will lead to a more democratized economic system. And
Accurate.
broadly speaking, I think we are on the same page there, even though we're obviously having a lot of disagreements when it comes to specific ways of getting there and handling that and what it will ultimately sort of look like. And like I said,
But could you imagine, Keaton?
Sure.
Could you imagine?
Go ahead.
If there were two people running for office, say like me and you were running for office,
Right.
and this was the actual debate. Could you imagine if this was the actual debate, that we both agreed we wanted something good for the people we want to represent, but we don't want to fight each other. We want to find a goddamn answer. That only happens right now, currently. The only way of making that happen right now is a third party. Because if you have a third party, the other two can't. That they can no longer just yell, other guy bad. Other guy bad matters only works when there's two parties.
No, we absolutely support that.
Out of my way to create as many coalitions as I can with as many people from around this state and country that I possibly can gather to say, let's get at least one independent party up and running, at least one, which is why I talk to Forward, which is why I'm a libertarian, which is why I talk to the Greens. It's why I talk to everybody.
Yeah.
I cannot see current. If there's a better answer, I will shut up and I will accept what the better answer is. But the answer that I see right now is third party or we're screwed, because I want this to happen, Keaton, so badly I can taste it. That is how bad I want it. I've been doing it for 5 years. I want it so damn badly.
Well, you know, Larry, if you look at the history of revolutions, very often it's people like yourself who were struggling in the dark for years until the right historical moment came, who wind up being at the forefront of those movements. So, you know, I mean, that kind of comes full circle. I think the purpose of shows like yours, of shows like ours, we're trying to build a movement and we're trying to build an intellectual framework for a movement. Right. And in the end, we have more in common than either one of us have with a doctrinaire Republican or a doctrinaire
100%.
in the tank
100%,
Democrat.
100%.
The people who are talking about what comes after are the people who are actually aware of what's happening in this country. The people who are still playing the two-party game, they still don't get it.
Right. I agree. Last super chat, Roger Meadows says, this is a great debate, like Hulk versus Juggernaut. We're doing good.
Doing good.
Guys, let me ask everybody, if I could, if you're watching this show and you like it, please click that like button. It really does matter. I know I bug you a lot, but it does matter. Please do it. If you're watching on Twitter, please retweet. The more people who see this, the better. It's nothing but good. Nothing but good. And of course, super chats, I appreciate them. But more importantly, these guys have given me 2 beautiful hours. Thank you so much, guys. I know I kept Keaton. He wanted to go. Thank you so much.
No, you're fine.
Please follow them. Follow them on Twitter. Follow them on YouTube. Subscribe to their channel. They create tons of content. They create content that's super chat content, all kind of cool content. Please follow them. Due Dissidence on Twitter and Due Dissidence on YouTube. Before we wrap this up, anything you guys want to bring up? Did I miss something that we should, before we wrap this up?
No, you hit everything. We stream every Sunday night at 7 Eastern, every Thursday night at 8 Eastern. We have a Substack, duedissidence.substack.com. We drop the occasional written article, and we put our live streams on an audio podcast, which is available through Substack and also on any major podcast player, so you can find us there. And Larry, thank you so much. It was really a great time. It's always just really great to talk to you, and we would love to have you on our show sometime soon.
Thank you very much, Larry.
We'll be back doing it again. Guys, thank you so much. I will, for those of you who care, if you can get out to New Jersey tomorrow, I'll be in the Butler, New Jersey area. We're at a Republican event speaking about liberty there. So if you want to see me there, 7 p.m. in Butler, New Jersey at the VFW. I'll be there, and then I'll be back on Monday at 9 p.m. I will see you all